A story of a seventh-generation farming family working a stunning property on the east coast of Tasmania. But running a farm is a balancing act. Whether it's food or fibre, there are critical choices about what crops to grow or which animals to keep. And central to the equation is the land. What's its best use? How's it to be managed? Chris Clark reports from historic Bangor.
The Brim Creek Show traces its origins back to 1886. And although it's a tiny one-day affair, it's among the most popular shows in southern Tasmania. In the wool tent, Matt Dunbabin's laying out the winning ribbons. The Brim Creek Show might be small, but it's still determinedly an agricultural show.
Gets people from the city out into the bush, and they get to see stuff they wouldn't normally see, like fleeces and shearing, and as well as all the other produce and stalls around the ground and displays in the arena.
Matt Dunbabin's the sixth generation of Dunbabins to farm in this region. Fine wool's their main game. So naturally, they have a fleece in the competition at Brim Creek for wool with a fibre diameter under 17 microns.
This is a fleece off one of our one-year-old sheep that we shore last year, and it took out first prize in its section, which is pleasing. It's particularly fine, and for that micron, it's quite a heavy fleece, which is important when they're showing fleeces. Weight counts for a lot, so that's great.
Just as the distractions of the Brim Creek Show have changed over its 150-year history, so the Dunbabins, like everyone else in the fine wool business, have had to change too.
That's one of our hoggets that got first.
Oh, is that a hogget?
In the finer than 17 category.
What Matt's father, Tom Dunbabin, produced 2 decades ago is no longer the benchmark. And the difference is largely down to technology.
Fibre diameter has decreased, and secondly, the weight of wool per sheep's increased. And that's pretty much entirely been as a result of being able to use objective breeding techniques and also wool measurement. So what's happening now is that the breeding is based on not just the feel of the wool and the look of the sheep, but also the physical measurement, and that's made a huge amount of difference.
The story of how the Dunbabins have used this land is a mixture of innovation and necessity. Most of their 6,500 hectares is native bush, perfect for fine wool, but it limits their more intensive prime lamb and cattle ventures. And they've devoted a third of the property to conservation reserves, which allow for limited or no grazing. It's also a story that begins with John Dunbabin, a convict made good.
John moved down here. He was an indentured convict, and he worked for Henry Bilton, who had land in Brim Creek, and he came down in 1840 odd, and after he got his pardon, he actually bought Bilton's property.
Tom Dunbabin is a 5th generation Dunbabin and a chronicler of the family history. He's written a book covering the years when his forebears farmed Maria Island, just a short boat ride from the mainland.
Maria Island's interesting because we've had that family connection, but for me even, it's part of the geography of where I live, because it's so obvious from Bangor, probably virtually from anywhere you can see the island.
During Tom Dunbabin's stewardship of Bangor, the family won a couple of prestigious land management awards. So I wanted to know what he thought of the way his great-grandfather farmed Maria Island nearly 150 years ago.
From their perspective, it was a success. They ran a successful business. I suspect that they were pretty conservative in their stocking and their grazing, so they would have managed it overall fairly conservatively, I suspect.
The early European history of Maria Island saw sealers and whalers give way to convicts, then farmers.
They came here in 1869 and farmed here for 7 years, and this was one of the major buildings that they used.
Tom Dunbabin used family letters to build a picture of farming life here.
On a couple of occasions there were references to people who came to the island and said how there was too much grass here. They should have more sheep. Well, my perspective is that too much grass has never caused me to lose any sleep, but a lack of it is an absolute nightmare.
The Dunbabins' stay on Maria Island was brief, but the family farming tradition went from strength to strength on the mainland.
It's been rewarding and interesting to be able to farm the similar sort of area, but in a much more productive sense than ancestors have done. That's been a bit of a challenge for various enterprises that we've undertaken over the years.
Some of those challenges are self-imposed, like limiting grazing and protecting country and conservation reserves. Geography influences some of that, but it's a view that sees the whole as land management, not conservation versus farming.
You must have a successful business model, business operation to maintain the rest of the farm. So unless the business model succeeds, it's not going to succeed no matter what your values might be. So it's not an either-or thing, it's the two are together.
Farming Bangor is now the daily responsibility of Matt and Vanessa Dunbabin. Their 3 children are part of the 7th generation of Dunbabins in Tasmania, and they must make their own way too. Fine wool remains the backbone of the enterprise, since most of the property is ideally suited to the purpose. They've planted a small vineyard and plan to produce their own label wines.
This is about the most intensifying thing we could do with a relatively small piece of land. It's in a great location, it's got a good aspect, good soil for growing vines, and it's near to the highway here, a lot of passing traffic, so our vision is we'd have a cellar door.
It offers the prospect of a slightly different experience to the normal life of most primary producers.
Unlike growing fine wool or most other agricultural products where you grow the product and it disappears out the door, we'll get to deal with the end buyer, the end consumer of our product, which will be something new and something enjoyable for us.
Wool is likely to remain the backbone of the operation at Bangor for as long as prices hold, and that means the quest for quality must continue. It's a fair step from the labours of Matt's father, Tom Dunbabin, let alone those who went before him.
Certainly when I look at what we're doing there now and what I did and what my son's doing now, he's cutting more wool of finer micron, using modern breeding techniques and technologies, and made sort of gains that I wouldn't have thought, and certainly my father wouldn't have thought possible.
The Dunbabins have made critical decisions about how this property's to be run. In the short term, the capacity to maintain the vision depends on wool prices.
I think there's a pretty good future in fine wool. Obviously it's tougher and tougher to make a dollar out of it, but I think if you keep improving the operation and as long as prices are semi-reasonable, we can go pretty well. And the way the industry is now and prices are pretty good, then fine wool sheep are as profitable as any sheep at the moment.
Matt Dunbabin sees a time when the story of how Bangor wool is produced becomes part of the way it's sold.
There's tradition here, so we've been growing it for a long time, and there's also the environment that we've got, so how we manage that environment. So the story is in the way that the sheep are run and the place that they're run to end up with the product that we get.
There might be easier properties to manage than Bangor. Excluding stock and conserving country certainly takes time and money. But whatever the weather, and the weather can be decidedly mixed, Bangor has its charms, as well as fresh challenges for generations to come.